something over 40%, near 45% of our entire budget. Currently, we are re-earning or recovering. We can refinance our own budget up to 60% through ticket sales, touring, and so forth.
Yeah. So, what is it like picking a music director? I imagine that there are musicians here in America who would kill for that privilege, or some who might think, "Oh my God, we couldn't trust ourselves. We would all disagree with each other. We would fight."
Yes, it's all of that. I was in Detroit in the years 1979 to 82, and the era with Antal Dorati was coming to an end, and they were looking to the future. And it was a very dramatic and very revolutionary moment in American orchestral history back then, when Detroit worked out a formula whereby they could actually take an active part in the choosing of the next director. It was a very arcane system of doing things, but it was a paragraph, a wordage in the master agreement, which was accepted for a while, and gave them a really significant say in the matter. I gather, I'm not sure, you'll have to check me on this later, but I gather they've since lost or given up this particular influential voice for reasons I can't comment on. I was long since gone. I also have heard that there's been more and more involvement on the part of the American musicians in recent years on the issue of choosing conductors.
Well, this is true and really on all aspects of orchestra management. American musicians have gotten more involved. But I don't think there's any major American orchestra, I know that there's no major American orchestra, that takes it to the point that you have in Berlin, where the musicians simply are the voice of last resort here. You all make the choice. Yes,
it's a little bit like a papal election, where people or the press are all camped outside, everyone's waiting, watching to see what happens, looking for white smoke. And
the whole world was last time. I remember vividly how
after Carillon and after Abbado, particularly with the post-Carillon election, that was quite extraordinary. We were locked up in a villa, basically locked up, windows and doors shut, telephone lines.
And you mean
capped.
When you say locked up, you mean every single one of you?
We were taken there by buses, and we were locked in, and had no telephones. They were all capped. No one could, we had a primitive, in those old days, a radio telephone. That was the only way we'd be able to communicate the result at the end of our deliberations. We had no idea how long we were going to be there. We brought in food and drink. We could have been there all night. We didn't know. But it went all day.
All night or all week? Does all week
no one
happen?
No one knew, because no one had experienced
Nobody had done it for a very long time.
34 years.
Yeah.
A whole generation had come and gone in the orchestra without ever having exercised its...
So now does the analogy with the College of Cardinals go so far that you can't talk about what happens?
Precisely.
Oh, well, then I suppose all of our lips are sealed. But in general, what is it like? Is it collegial? Is it angry? I'm sure all of the above is likely to be the answer.
No, it's actually nothing like an emotional thing. It's extremely, the German word sachlich, it means very, very objective and very detailed. In the election for Claudio Abbado back then, we decided to make a rule that everyone had to stand and speak. That even if you had a very minor opinion, or you were trying to shun the spotlight, you would be required to stand and say something. I think we were limited to 5 minutes. You were not required to speak for 5 minutes, but you had a limit, and you could not speak a second time until every single member of the orchestra had been through it once. Just to give you a little bit of human interest. But basically, it's a very thorough, very cool, very, very objective, and very it's a very important decision. And emotion plays only a part in as much as one wants to include the emotional component in music making, but not a decision based on an emotional setting.
And do you talk about very mundanely, very vulgarly, business factors, who is going to be the best visible face of the orchestra? Or is it largely about music making, a combination of both?
It would be disingenuous of me to say no to the first. But very, very little is actually a decision. Both these decisions for Claudio Abbado and for Simon Rattle 12 years later, neither of the decisions were made for prurient business reasons like the record sale and so on. The press, of course, played it up hugely and assumed that it was, and they were trying actually to exercise their own influence over us on that area. But in the end, I'm very proud to say about my fellow colleagues in our orchestra, the decision was made each time based on that which we felt to be the best for the orchestra and for music.
And does there need to be a vote of a certain majority, a 2/3 majority? How would it work? How do you know when you're done?
In advance, each time we set up the ground rules slightly differently. And I honestly cannot remember which was what when. But it had to be, obviously for such a decision of such importance, the end result has to be with a fairly considerable majority, not just a simple majority.
Mm-hmm. And then the music director is your employee?
Oh, you want to get really confusing now?
I do.
As a member of the Board of Trustees, the music director works for me.
Mm-hmm.
We sign off on his contract, as does the intendant work for us.
And the members of the Board of Trustees are all musicians?
Some, only some.
What proportion?
There's 2 of us out of 7.
Ah.
But as a musician, I'm employed by the intendant. So it gets very confusing.
I do want to observe, since there's talk about the Anglo-American model and the German model, that we American types in the Anglo-American relationship pride ourselves on our notion of democracy, but in fact we're very strong believers in hierarchy, aren't we? And we feel that there needs to be somebody who clearly is the person who holds the power in any situation. And we would stereotype Germans as being that way and not being very collegial. So apparently the stereotype is not
seems to be in the orchestral world quite the other way around.
Yeah. And so what are the practical consequences for music making? Do you feel more collegial with the music director than
Not necessarily,
you would?
but what it does, and this is the critical, I would say the most important decision that a member of our orchestra is entrusted with, is another one, and that is the choice of the musicians in the orchestra themselves. The audition procedure with us is run whereby there are no screens, no attempt is made to be fair in that respect. It's we want to see everything and learn everything we possibly can about the candidate. And the orchestra as a whole sits in the audience and listens to the entire audition and votes, and it's a simple majority vote of the entire orchestra. If the music director chooses to attend, he's accorded 1 vote like everyone else. But he doesn't have to attend and has no particular authority or rights attendant with that. That process is for us the most critical to the understanding of what our image of ourselves is and how the organization is run. We choose our own players. Close on second place comes the choice of music director. Same kind of procedure, again, a democratic decision made by the entire orchestra, but not in the end quite as important as the players, because, quite simply, a conductor is there for a few years, or many years. The players I'm with for the rest of my life. One of the cynical jokes we make is it's easier to divorce yourself from your wife than from your colleagues.
Yes.
So you are entering a relationship as intimate and as long-lasting and as full of commitment on both sides as a marriage every time we take any.
And one where the commitment has to be taken seriously, and you don't want to enter it with somebody that you don't really know well.
Exactly.
So I understand that this vote by a simple majority up or down is only the beginning of what can be a very long process.
That's just at the audition level.
Yes.
Then we enter the probationary period of 2 years, at the end of which the successful candidate has to win a 2/3 majority in secret ballot at the orchestra parliament. Just by the nature of numbers and statistics, to get 2/3 majority in any decision is an overwhelming vote of confidence, and that's what we require. We require an overwhelming vote of confidence in order to be accorded lifetime membership in the Berlin Philharmonic.
And how do you as a horn player feel, let's say, voting for a section viola player? Do you feel that you really have a handle on how they play?
Obviously, particularly at the tenure issue, I'm at a disadvantage because I don't get to hear them very often playing by themselves. Therefore, I'm very dependent on the expert opinion of the group in question. In this case, it would be the viola group. On the other hand, we go to great lengths during the probationary period to get to know the individuals personally. You know, might go out for a drink with one of them, or have dinner sometime. Find out who they are. Talk to the colleagues too, and find out how they're reacting. Watch the dynamics and see if there's antagonism there that might have nothing to do with what the musicianship is about. There may be something else going on. So that, oddly enough, there's a leveling influence provided by the large majority of players who are not in the affected group. And the affected group has got a responsibility to convince